If I don't go, he, by extension, can't go because it's my family's cabin, for the record. We are both 30 years old. We have 4 children combined. The youngest is 6 months old. I'm not sure what it is about his family, but our daughter screams every single time these people are around us, every other week at least. Whenever they come over, I find myself beyond stressed out because my daughter screams the entire time, and his family thinks it's funny. Like they pass her around while she's screaming, and they laugh about it, and it takes them forever to hand her back to me to get her calmed down. And all of them claim that she acts like that because I spoil her. His family consists of his mom, his 2 sisters, and both of his sisters have 1 daughter each, 15 and 13. Our daughter doesn't act like this when it comes to anyone else, family, friends, or complete strangers. She loves people. But the second any of my husband's family come around, she screams from the time they show up until they leave, unless I physically leave the room with her. Anyways, I needed a vacation. I asked my parents if I could use their cabin for a week next week, and they said yes. My husband, for whatever reason, decided that he wanted his mom to come, and she invited her daughters. So I'm getting text messages saying, "What should I bring?" and whatever else. I never wanted them to come. I asked my husband why the hell he would invite his family when it pretty much sets in stone that I will have an absolute nightmare of a time because our daughter does not like these people. The whole point of a vacation was to relax, not add more stress to it by basically ensuring that our daughter will not be set down for a split second because she is afraid of his family. He said that he thought it would be fine because we had talked in the past, pre-baby, about inviting them to the cabin for a family vacation, and said that maybe having our daughter surrounded with all of them for a week would make her like them. I told him I'm 100% not okay with that, and he needs to tell them that none of them are welcome, even his mother, whom I can't stand to be around due to her constant baby advice. You need to put her down. She acts like that because you spoil her. He said he doesn't feel comfortable telling them they can't go because he already said they could, and he doesn't want to offend anyone. I snapped and said, either tell them they aren't coming or me and the kids won't go. Better yet, you can stay home with your family and me and the kids will go without you. He slammed off to his office, shut the door, and is now not speaking to me. Am I the idiot? He says that I'm deliberately cutting his family out and have been since the baby was born. And honestly, I feel like cutting his family out because it stresses me out having a baby scream for hours whenever they come here. And I'm tired of it because it's me who has to deal with it. ETA. Yes, he makes a habit of doing this. Every time we go anywhere at all, beach, park, movies, etc., he is inviting either his mom and his sister's nieces. If he only invites his mom, she will then invite her daughters. We literally can't do anything without them, and this is how it's been since we moved back to his hometown 2 years ago. I have told him several times that I'm tired of it and don't want them invited to go with us everywhere we go, and he doesn't see what the issue is and tries pulling the "if it was your family, you wouldn't mind" card. But there's zero comparison because I see my family maybe 3 times a year. He even invited his mom here immediately following us leaving the hospital with the baby, without telling me, and she invited her daughters. So they all showed up here when my daughter was 3 days old and got pissed off at me for not being okay with it. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. 1, it's not his cabin to invite people. It is your family's. He has no right to invite others to somebody else's cabin. That in itself is disrespectful, and he needs to set boundaries. This is seriously something that needs to be addressed because they have no respect for you, including your husband and your children. Because if they did, they wouldn't allow that poor child to scream and find it funny. That's borderline abuse in my book. I would either make him set boundaries or separate and show that you're serious. You need to move away from his family or separate because he doesn't seem like he can live without his mommy up his butt and he needs to grow a spine. He doesn't need to see his family every other week and invite them to every event or vacation that you have. Who does that? He needs to cut the cord. Comment 2. Not the idiot. You need a break. He should have consulted you before adding to the guest list. Tell him to speak with his mom and just tell her that he jumped the gun and you guys are going to do the vacation with only immediate family. It's not a big deal, and I can't imagine his family won't respect that. And if they don't, he still needs to tell them. He needs to just handle it. Now for the update, thanks for the support on my last post. Well, things escalated quickly after that. The cabin trip was a disaster before it even started. My husband didn't budge, and his family was all set to come. I was at my wit's end, so I did what I had to do. I packed up the kids and left for the cabin alone. My husband was furious, but I couldn't handle another minute of that chaos. The week at the cabin was peaceful, just me and the kids. But back home, things were unraveling. My husband had stayed with his family, and they were all stewing over what I had done. His mom was especially upset, saying I was tearing the family apart. I didn't care. I needed that break for my sanity. When I got back, the tension was thick. My husband and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was just arguing. He said I was being unreasonable and that I had embarrassed him in front of his family. I told him he didn't respect my feelings and that our daughter's well-being came first. It was a mess. Then, out of nowhere, his mom did something unexpected. She apologized, said she realized how her behavior was affecting our daughter and that she would try to be more understanding. It was a shock, and for a moment, it seemed like things might get better. But it didn't last. The next family gathering was a nightmare. Our daughter was screaming again, and his family was back to their old ways, laughing and passing her around. I lost it. I grabbed my daughter and locked us in a bedroom until they left. My husband was embarrassed, and his family was angry. They said I was overreacting and that I was the problem. It was clear something had to change. I sat down with my husband and laid it all out. I told him that our family had to be the priority, and that his family's behavior was not okay. He finally seemed to get it. He agreed to set some boundaries with his mom and sisters. But just when I thought we were making progress, another bomb dropped. My husband got a job offer in another state. It was a great opportunity for him, but it meant moving away from his family. He was torn. He wanted the job, but he didn't want to leave his family behind. After a lot of talking, we decided he should take the job. It would be a fresh start for us, a chance to focus on our family without the constant stress of his family's interference. It was a tough decision, but it felt right. The move was hectic, but we managed. We settled into our new home, and things were looking up. Our daughter was happier, and our family was finally getting some peace. My husband even admitted that the distance from his family was a relief. But then, just as we were getting comfortable, his mom announced she was moving to be closer to us. She said she couldn't stand being away from her son and grandchildren. My heart sank. It felt like we were back to square one. I don't know what the future holds now. Will his mom bring the same chaos to our new life, or has she really changed? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure. I'll do whatever it takes to protect my family's peace. Thanks for reading. My date calls me selfish for not giving up my virginity. So I expose his manipulative plans to his friends and watch his reputation crumble. For context, me and this guy have been talking for a few months, and it's still somewhat new. He's 7 years older than me, and we are both of legal age to have intimacy in the country we live in. He took me out for a date at a local restaurant, and all was going well. We were talking, and the topic of virginity came up. He told me he has had intimacy multiple times before we started talking, and asked me how many partners I've had. I told him I was a virgin. This came as a surprise to him, mostly because I dress quite revealing, and I have talked about having ex-boyfriends. I noticed him becoming really eager, and he told me he really wanted to take my virginity because he'd never slept with a virgin before. This is where things became complicated. I have a specific kink I discovered that is basically the only thing that can turn me on. I've tried to think about vanilla stuff when I'm alone, but it never works unless I imagine fulfilling this kink. It is extremely important to me that, especially for my first time, I actually enjoy the intimacy. When I mentioned this to him, I also explained that if he wasn't comfortable doing it, then we could just not have intercourse, and I'm completely fine with that, and we can continue what we have and maybe discuss it later. However, he said that the issue wasn't that he wasn't comfortable with it. He definitely could do it, but he just didn't want to. He then went on to explain that it does nothing for him and he wants his first time sleeping with a virgin to be as he imagined it. I tried to, again, explain that losing my virginity was a very important and sacred thing for me, and that I felt my pleasure should come first considering it was my first time. But he simply called me selfish and kept trying to reason with me why his pleasure was more important until I flat out refused to have intimacy with him. He called me immature and sensitive for taking away his opportunity to do something he really wanted to do and left the date. And I can't help but wonder if maybe I was in the wrong. I texted him a few times since the date trying to apologize, considering I really do like him, and I hope it's not a deal breaker, but he has made it pretty clear by not replying that he doesn't want to talk to me. Am I in the wrong? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Jesus Christ, girl, he's just a stack of red flags in a trench coat. He's excited about taking your virginity but completely uninterested in you actually enjoying the experience? And he called you selfish for not letting him live out some disgusting, misogynistic prima nocta fantasy of the demure, quivering virgin? What the actual hell? Please, and I cannot emphasize this enough, do not speak another word to him ever. I'm literally nauseated right now. He's a disgusting predator who's not worth one more second of your time. Comment 2. He kept trying to reason with me why his pleasure was more important until I flat out refused to have intimacy with him. He called me immature and sensitive for taking away his opportunity to do something he really wanted to do and left the date, and I can't help but wonder if maybe I was in the wrong. What? Run. Away. Now. Now, for the update. Thanks for sticking around for this update. So, after that whole mess with the date, things got even more twisted. I thought it was over, but no, life had more in store. A friend of mine, let's call her M, who knew both of us, decided to throw a party. She invited me, and guess who else was there? Yeah, him. I didn't know he'd be there, and seeing him again was like a punch in the gut. He acted like nothing happened, all smiles and charm. But then, out of nowhere, he pulled me aside and dropped a news. He said he'd been thinking and was now willing to consider my kink. I was stunned, but also wary. Why the sudden change of heart? I should have trusted my gut. Later that night, I overheard him bragging to his friends about how he was just playing along to get what he wanted. He said once he got me in bed, he'd do things his way. I felt sick, betrayed, and angry. How could I have even thought about giving him a second chance? But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I confronted him in front of everyone, told them what he'd said. His friends looked at him like he was a stranger. He tried to deny it, but the truth was out. He left the party with nothing but a few mumbled excuses. The next day, I thought it was all behind me, but life had another curveball. M came to me, eyes full of tears. She confessed that she'd known about his plan all along. She thought it was just guy talk, that he wasn't serious. She felt terrible for inviting me and not warning me. I was floored. M, my friend, had kept this from me. It hurt, but I could see she was genuinely sorry. We talked it out, and I realized she was just as much a victim of his lies as I was. We decided to put it behind us, but trust, once broken, isn't easily mended. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, another revelation hit. One of his friends, who'd been at the party, reached out to me. He said he couldn't stop thinking about how I'd stood up to him, how I'd fought back. He said he had a lot of respect for me. We started talking, and it turns out we have a lot in common. It's been, well, interesting, but I'm taking things slow. I'm not about to rush into anything again. I've learned my lesson. I'm focusing on people who respect me and my boundaries. And as for him, well, he's just a bad memory now. Thanks for reading this far. My ex-wife cheats and lies about our son's paternity, but when she ends up hospitalized and alone, I decide whether to forgive or let karma take its course, and I choose to watch her suffer the consequences of her actions. So me and my ex-wife Mary, real name because I don't care if she finds out, have been together for 5 years and married for 2. Our relationship was mostly fine, and we always had only one major issue. She cheated on me when we were together for 3 years, and after a lot of therapy, I decided to forgive her, and she decided to work harder for our relationship. It wasn't an easy decision at all, but I loved her more than myself, and decided to forgive her. Then, since things were going great and she changed from therapy, I decided to marry her, and she accepted. It was the best day of my life, even though my friends told me that I was insane to marry her because of her cheating and her past. She has a very high body count of over 100, but I loved her anyway. Unfortunately, my friends didn't show up for my wedding because they were extremely skeptical, but I didn't care because I was too happy. Her parents were also happy that we worked things out, and the whole wedding and honeymoon were just amazing, and it was like I was living in one of those fairy tales. Then, after a year of marriage, she became pregnant, and I was super happy to start a family with her, and the whole pregnancy went smoothly. But then when our son was born, something was wrong because he didn't look like me at all, and had just small things of my wife but really nothing like me. I started thinking about it, and some things were off, like her announcement of pregnancy. When she told me that she was 4 weeks pregnant, I hadn't had intimacy with her for 2 weeks because I was in another country for the sign of a very big client. And then when I asked my wife to be there when she was about to give birth, she hesitated, but told me yes. So after thinking again and again about all the wrong things, I did something that I don't regret. I took my son for a DNA test while my wife was at work, and I was at home with my son. After a week, the results came back, and my worst nightmare became reality because he wasn't my son. The same day, I immediately contacted my lawyer, and after explaining the whole situation, he started to prepare the divorce papers. So after a month, I served them to my ex-wife and told her that I knew that our son wasn't mine. So don't make things complicated and just sign the papers. The drama started and she started to cry, beg me to not divorce her, telling me that she would become better, that we could put our son up for adoption, that she made a mistake, and all the classic excuses of a cheater. But I stood my ground and told her that I couldn't change my mind after I had already forgiven her once. After 2 hours of this pathetic scene, she finally signed the papers and packed her stuff. She called her dad, crying and telling him to pick her up, but without telling him what happened. While we were there waiting for him, she was crying and begging me to forgive her, that she would become better. But I just ignored her, and when her dad arrived, he asked what the hell was going on, and I showed him the results of the DNA test. He started yelling at her and was extremely mad and angry for what she did, and finally, they drove away to her parents' house. Fortunately, in our country, divorces under 5 years are quickly resolved, so in a few months we were divorced and she got nothing from me, not even alimony or any type of it. The thing is that in those days and even now, I never cried, shouted, or did any of these things, but I just feel broken and empty inside, like this thing changed something in me. Obviously, my friends, when they knew about this, were happy and started to tell me the classic "I told you so." Thinking about it now, they were right. But I was blindsided by love for her that I didn't understand the whole mess. Months passed by since the divorce, and I still feel like an empty and broken human. But I don't regret doing the DNA test because my worries were right. Now the issue is that a few days ago I met some of me and my ex-wife, mutual friends, and we talked a bit about our life changes and obviously about the whole mess. They told me that my ex-wife is depressed, sad, and that the AP disappeared, leaving her to stay at one of their houses. They asked me if I regret the divorce, but I told them absolutely not because I forgive once, but not twice, and not a big thing like baby trapping. They called me heartless and cold for not thinking of her even once, and the baby is 1-year-old now, because according to them, she still cries for me and still punishes herself for what she did, because she really regrets her actions. So am I the idiot? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You gave her a second chance after the first episode of cheating, and that's more than 75% of people would do. She then squandered that opportunity, and that's her own damn fault. You are not the jerk at all. Comment 2. OP. I doubt that your friends were happy that you were hurt, but rather glad to finally see you leave a situation that everyone knew was bad. Now for the update. Thanks for catching up with me again. Well, it's been a month since I last updated you, and you wouldn't believe the roller coaster I've been on. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, life threw me another curveball. Remember how I told you about my ex-wife Mary and the whole paternity mess? Turns out that was just the tip of the iceberg. So after the divorce was finalized, I thought I could finally move on. But no, life had other plans. One of our mutual friends, let's call him Mark, approached me with some news that knocked the wind out of me. He said he had something important to tell me, something about Mary and the time leading up to our split. I should have known better than to trust Mark, but curiosity got the better of me. Mark revealed that Mary had been seeing someone else, someone from our circle of friends, and that this person was the father of the child. But here's the kicker. He claimed that Mary was manipulated into it, that this guy, let's call him John, had been pulling the strings all along. According to Mark, John had convinced Mary that I was having an affair during my business trips, which of course was a complete lie. Fueled by jealousy and hurt, Mary fell for John's deceit and ended up in his arms. I was furious, not just at Mary, but at John for meddling in our lives. And Mark, well, he was no better for keeping this from me. I confronted John, and we had a huge blowout. Accusations were thrown, punches were nearly exchanged, and in the end, John admitted to everything. He had been jealous of what Mary and I had, and wanted to sabotage our marriage. Feeling like a fool, I cut ties with both of them, but the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, Mary's father came to see me. He was furious, not just with Mary, but with me as well. He accused me of abandoning Mary and the baby, of not giving her a second chance. He didn't care about the manipulation or the lies. All he saw was his daughter in pain. And then, as if things couldn't get any worse, I found out that Mary had taken a turn for the worse. She had been hospitalized for stress and depression. Despite everything, I felt a pang of guilt. Was I too harsh on her? Should I have handled things differently? But before I could even process these thoughts, another news dropped. The hospital called. Mary had listed me as her emergency contact. I rushed over, and there she was, looking frail and broken. She begged for my forgiveness, for a chance to explain everything. She told me that she had been lost, that John had preyed on her insecurities, and that she never stopped loving me. I didn't know what to believe anymore. Was this another manipulation? Was she truly remorseful? I left the hospital with a heavy heart, my mind, well, interesting of emotions. Now, as I sit here recounting the past month's events, I can't help but feel like a pawn in a game I never agreed to play. My friends say I'm being too hard on Mary, that I should show some compassion. But how can I? After all the lies, the deceit, the betrayal. Thanks for listening. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.